Hello, hello, hello. Welcome, everyone. Welcome to Room for Everyone, a panel discussion with some of your favorite Wattpad stars, where we will discuss diversity and inclusion in the stories we write. My name is Brittany Chung Campbell. My pronouns are she, her. I'm a book coach and ethical storytelling consultant, and I am so excited to be moderating this conversation with these amazing authors. Today, we'll be discussing diversity and inclusion in storytelling. What does that look like? Who can write inclusive stories? How can we get it right without perpetuating problematic issues? And the importance of continuing the fight for inclusive stories. Throughout the discussion, please feel free to put your questions in the chat for the authors so that we can have them for the Q&A portion later. So joining us today, for our discussion, we have Evelyn Yang, the author of Omen Girl, which is a 2020 Waddies winner. And Evelyn is never not writing, even if it's just in her head. She is obsessed with magical worlds, fascinated by the darkness of monsters, and is forever arrested by the romance of overcoming barriers. We also have Sondi Warner with us today, and she is the author of Lead Me Astray, which is a paranormal romance novel making its publication debut in March 2022. When not writing, Sondi uses her platform to advocate for LGBTQ plus rights and to promote mental health awareness as well. She lives in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, with her life partner, her 4 children, and her cat, 7. And we also have Marianna Leal with us as well. Marianna is a Venezuelan writer of young adult fiction. She is currently focused on contemporary stories and with fantasy and sci-fi ideas as well, which is awesome. She is determined to represent her gente and writes about strong and vulnerable girls who make their way in the world that tells them that they don't belong or that they're not enough. And she also writes for boys who are not afraid to show emotion and to grow from it as well. And yes, some of her stories usually have a little campiness as well. And then finally, we have Romi Moondi joining us as well. She's a Canadian writer who primarily writes rom-coms with the aim to make you laugh, to activate your heartstrings, and even get some dust in your eye on occasion. When she's not writing novels, she can be found dreaming up screenplays, copywriting for clients, traveling, trying out new recipes, and her love for Seinfeld is forever. And her story, 24 Hours in Paris from W by Wattpad Books, will be available online and in bookstores on May 10th. So please help me in welcoming these amazing authors to the virtual stage. So to start off, I would love it if we could share our pronouns and maybe answer the first question, which is, what does storytelling, inclusive storytelling, mean to you? And what is your motivation to write these inclusive stories? Maybe we can start off with Evelyn.
Oh no, starting off first. I'm she, her. I already forgot the question.
So what does inclusive storytelling mean to you?
What does it mean to me? Oh my gosh.
What is the motivation for writing the stories that you write?
I don't know. I just want to see characters that look like me, I guess. So that's a big part. And I mean, I'm based in Canada as well. So it's a very multicultural city, country. So, you know, you just see colors of all sorts everywhere, skin colors of all sorts everywhere. And to be able to see reality reflected in our works, yeah, that's always lovely.
Awesome. Rami, you want to go next?
Sure. My pronouns are she, her. And I guess what motivates me is just growing up and not seeing a lot of stories, you know, with characters that look like me, especially in the lead roles. Like, I guess there was a lot of tokenism, you know, like the typical Indian character that drives a taxi or whatever. So I was just kind of sick of that, I guess. So as soon as I started writing fiction, my first order of business was to make sure the protagonist had a South Asian background, you know, for more representation. So that's really important to me.
That's awesome. So it seems like part of your motivation for you and Evelyn is just wanting to see more characters that like look like you, that reflect the environment that you are kind of living in. So that's awesome. Marianna, would you like to go next?
Sure. My pronouns are also she and her. And exactly like everybody else, I just wanted to reflect my reality with my books. It took me a very long time, I will admit this in front of everyone, to get out of the mindset that the only stories that people were interested in were of a certain demographic, and that I also had a right to see myself, to see my people, my culture reflected in stories. And yes, I am a minority where I live. I'm located in the US, but that doesn't mean that what I have to share is not worth, you know, something for other people. So that's why I took on pretty much the mission of always having Venezuelan characters, whether the female lead or the love interest, in my stories.
Great, that's awesome. And Sondi, would you like to go as well?
Yes, I'm Sondi. My pronouns are she and her, and also they and them. And to wit, everyone else's answers are fantastic, and I think they are kind of the they speak for all of us. We are people of color. We want to see stories that reflect our lived reality. On a deeper level, I'm also from the United States, and I feel one of the things that a lot of spaces we enter into now require us to do is to interrogate what our lived experience is and how it fits within the framework of the universal ideal. And so I write stories with queer characters as well as characters who are people of color, because I want to explore the lived reality outside of myself as well. I want to look at these different ways we fit together universally as well as individually. What is it that makes my character Ari, who happens to be a Black woman, relate to someone like Miss, my character from Lead Me Astray, who is a Japanese American? And of course, I think that ultimately we are doing this in this arena because we know that the next generation shouldn't have the experience we had growing up, which was going to the library, grabbing a book and saying, this is a fantastic story about that person, but where do people like me? So I think we're all doing this a little bit so that we can usher that next generation into seeing themselves. Yeah.
Yes, definitely. And I love what you said about not only exploring what is your identity or your lived experience, but also kind of writing about other experiences as well. And that is what inclusive storytelling actually is. So that brings me to my next question. Does your personal identity help to inform the stories that you write? And if so, how?
I'll just chime in here because that's a fantastic question. And certainly I think that the characters that I write are informed by my identity and from the perspective of being someone who is marginalized, which creates this ironic space in which you have to observe other people very carefully so that, number one, you can make sure that when you need to code switch, you can. But it's also, again, inadvertently, it means that you understand people who are not like you much better than perhaps the people who are not like you understand you. And that allows me to write characters who come from many different backgrounds because I'm already looking at life through the lens of how do we relate and how are we different and how can those differences create better relating,
Mm-hmm. And also like more robust stories with like multiple identities and experiences. I love that. Would anyone like to jump in and answer this question as well?
Yes, I can jump in.
Go ahead.
Thank you. The easiest point of view to write from is always going to be your own. So that's the lens through which you see the world. You have your set of experiences, your collection of traumas, your wishes, hopes, dreams. So especially for writers who are in the beginning of their journey, this is going to be the easiest transition from author personhood to new character who is different from the author. And then the more experience you gather throughout your writing journey, of course, you will start to develop the tools, the empathy, the communication skills to get into the mindset of other communities, let's say, so that you can write about them with, you know, the care that you would if you were writing from your own community, as long as, of course, you're leading with empathy, and that you're not writing for them, that you're not, you know, thinking that because you have 20 years of writing experience, now you can absolutely write the point of view of somebody who deserves a seat at the table to write their own story.
Definitely. And I love what you said about having a certain level of experience and having that space to grow into writing more inclusive stories. I find it is especially hard for newbie authors to kind of maybe hit the nail on the head when it comes to, you know, good representation, or like staying away from those problematic tropes and stereotypes. So I definitely agree with what you said about that level of experience. Evelyn, do you have anything to add to this?
Not really. Everyone already made such great points. Like my own story was the entire plot, the entire character arc of Sozo was very much based on my own, I guess, lived experience. So yeah, I just kind of second what everybody else is saying.
Yeah, definitely. And Romi, you mentioned that you grew up reading books with the same stereotypical Indian characters. The taxi driver is one of those stereotypical tropes. Do you have anything to add to this question as well in terms of your personal experience, your personal identity and experiences informing what you write?
Yeah, I think from hearing everyone else, it seems now that kind of what I went through was relatable, which is great to hear, because early on, I think I was making up for a big gap. And so I had to get a lot out of my system. So the first series was inspired by my real life, just because there was just so much I wanted to say and what I had experienced and the frustration. And a lot of it stemming from, you know, like we're full rounded 360-degree people. We're not just a stereotype or a caricature. So it was really important for me to show that in the stories. Like, you know, we have dreams, we're flawed, we go on quests, we do all the things, like we search for love. And so growing up, like my culture was definitely a part of my life, but it wasn't the only thing that defined me either. Like I had other interests and hobbies and, you know, the same, you know, dating misadventures that everybody else has. So then once I got that out of my system in the first series, so this book that's coming out in May, 24 Hours in Paris, a lot of it's based on my travels, but the character is now completely her own. None of those things happened to me. But it's a great chance to just show, hopefully, a complex character that doesn't fall into any of those tropes.
Yeah, definitely. And when it comes to writing these kinds of stories, are you actively thinking about, okay, I need to be inclusive here, I need to make sure the story is full of diverse characters, or is it just something that comes natural to you?
I think it just comes natural, just in the sense of, like, you know, being in Toronto, which is so multicultural, you know, and having friends that are straight or gay, like it's just the life that I live. And I love meeting people from different backgrounds and perspectives. Like I'm drawn to that naturally. So when I'm writing fiction, I just kind of want that to be reflected back in the world of the characters as well, because I think it's accurate. Like I know in the past, like there's been shows that have been set in New York as an example, right? Such a diverse city. And you're watching this show and you're like, how are there only white people in New York City? Like that literally does not make sense. So it's just a natural extension of, I guess, the world that I live in.
Definitely. Would anyone else like to answer that question? Is diversity a conscious, active thing as you're writing, or is it something that either comes natural? Do you have a process?
I will say that when it comes to my writing, I deliberately choose to write LGBTQ plus books. I deliberately choose to write romance novels that feature polyamorous relationship dynamics. And I do that very specifically because I want to introduce new readers to the idea that they can restructure their concepts of what romance looks like. I want them to come to the table asking questions. I want them to see themselves, but also see people who may not be like them. And as far as diversity is concerned, I think that maybe we look at it sometimes from this idea of levels of scales of how much diversity. And I guess maybe sometimes we can ask, how deliberate are we being about the scale of diversity? And of course, sometimes we come to a project intending to scale up, and sometimes the project finds us and we find ourselves creating these characters who just happen to span a very broad spectrum there. But yeah, when it comes to writing romance novels specifically that feature LGBTQ plus characters and that feature polyamorous relationships, I'm very deliberate about that because I believe that it is a lived reality for so many people, and it is an interesting lived reality, and it also doesn't get explored enough. Yeah.
Awesome. Marianna, would you like to jump in on this question as well?
Yes. So I was thinking as Romi and Sondi were speaking, and I think that for myself, when it comes to my contemporary books, it's not really something that I do deliberately. It happens because it reflects my world, my environment, me as a person. So I'm an expat. I'm from Venezuela, born and raised. I left the country. I moved to Europe. I lived in Europe for several years. I moved to the US, back to Europe, back to the US. So I've had a very interesting trajectory for the past 10 years or so, where I've met so many people from different, origins, religions, beliefs, political leanings, et cetera, et cetera. This is my life. It's easy for me to reflect it. I think I do think about this more deliberately when I'm writing something that is more like fantasy or sci-fi or supernatural, because there's a different set of rules there. There might be a fantasy world that is completely different from ours, and then I have to be more deliberate in how I'm going to reflect the diversity in our world in this fictional book, in this fictional setting, and how to present that in an empathic way so that I'm not falling, for those dangerous tropes, just to be able to say like, oh, this character is the equivalent of this nationality in our world, for example. So I do have to think about it with more care and more detail in those settings.
Mm-hmm. And does that happen during the writing process, or are you the type of writer that maybe will write their manuscript and then like go back and say, okay, maybe I can inject some diversity here and there?
Definitely as I go. I plan with a lot of time in advance, depending on the book, sometimes months, sometimes years. And as I'm sort of plotting what's going to happen and deciding, who are the characters who are going to be the main characters, the secondary characters who are going to have an impact on the main characters' journeys, that's when I think of who is the right person, let's say, to fill this spot. And then I just write them naturally throughout the book. I don't have to go back and then, artificially add it. In my opinion, when you have to do that, you're not intertwining their identity into the story correctly.
It's very interesting. Evelyn, do you also have anything to add to this question as well?
I agreed pretty strongly with what Marianne was saying near the end, like just going back and kind of, I guess, adding on a race or culture artificially, right? It is artificial. I mean, when I wake up first thing in the morning, I don't think, wow, I feel Asian today. Like when I wake up in the morning, I'm just like, wow, I'm hungry. Or like, what am I going to do? Like people in their core are far beyond the color of their skin, are far beyond even their culture, right? People at their core are about immediate needs, and then about wants, and then about dreams, and then, oh, in jumps my cat. I try to make a barricade, but it did not stop Leviticus. Lost my train of thought, but yeah.
totally agree what you said. Like, it's not just about assigning maybe a race or an experience to your character. There's so many like nuanced things that come with that. And so I think that's really important to note. Another question comes to mind when it comes to diverse and inclusive stories. We often see people say, stay in your lane, write what you know. What is your opinion on people who want to write inclusive stories or have diverse characters, but may not have lived that experience?
I can jump in with that. I think it really depends on the context of the conversation. So I also write screenplays sometimes, and that is very heavily dominated by white males. It's just, I guess maybe it started that way with the networking and the connections, and we all know about the broken system of Hollywood, right? So at that point, like, I think you have to also make room for the people who want to tell their stories, because sometimes the argument is made in screenwriting, which is, well, there aren't a lot of people of color or women screenwriters because they don't do that. That's not something they get into. And that has been debunked multiple times. So sometimes, you know, that person who is a white male who wants to sell the big script is going to dive into these other cultures when maybe those people from those cultures or backgrounds have the stories and are talented, and they're not getting the opportunities. So I think it's just something, like, it's easy to say, like, of course we want everyone to include complex characters in their stories, even if it's not necessarily their background. But what I would hope is that we first check to make sure that people from those actual backgrounds are not missing out on those opportunities.
I definitely agree. As we know, the hashtag Ownvoices was a huge movement on Twitter. We saw the movement of Publishing Paid Me on Twitter as well during 2020, where it was showing the disparity within marginalized communities who were trying to get published. Authors like Roxane Gay literally put up how much that they made in comparison to other white hetero male authors, and that really was like a wake-up moment, among other wake-up moments within the publishing world. So I definitely agree with you, Romi. Would anyone like to jump in on this one as well?
Definitely, I'd like to hop in on that, because one of the things you pointed out was the disparities in payment. One of the things that Romi pointed out was that we have certain specific areas of the industry that have been so white male dominated for such a long time that it's just a default. It is actually considered the professional standard, despite the fact that it is a professional standard, but it is not the, you know, the final truth. And I think that one of the things that I like the most about the movement that we're getting into right now, which I think we all are part of, with this kind of creative, you know, this democratized creativity, is that we are allowing ourselves the space to create without this template that says this is how it should be done. And utilizing sites like Wattpad, like YouTube, like TikTok, like all of these spaces in which creators have much more control over what they are submitting to the world. We are allowing ourselves to explore these stories in a very authentic way, where gatekeepers can't say, no, this isn't right for this venue. This is always right for any of the people who come to our platforms seeking the content that we are creating. I think that's the first step, you know, is to have spaces in which we can all tell our stories our way. And I think that the second step is to continue the process we've been doing, continue fighting so that these particular platforms understand the value that we bring to them. And so, for example, you saw the movement, particularly on Twitter, when it came down to TikTok, where a lot of the creators decided, hey, we're not gonna create for a duration of time until you understand that we are driving some of these things that you find entertaining. You saw the same thing with the Ownvoices, and from a different lens and from the perspective of, you know what, we're gonna create as much content as we can under the Ownvoices tag. And all of these little movements are a part of a bigger progression that is happening in entertainment and in culture and in creativity. And that is a space of, I don't care about what gate you're keeping, because I don't need that gate anymore. And I think that's really, really important for us to see our wins on that one, because that's a big one.
Yes, definitely. And it's awesome that we now have platforms like Wattpad to just kind of like take down those gates, as you said, democratize storytelling, which is like, yeah, finally we can see ourselves in these different mediums, and you guys are all doing the work. So that's awesome. Marianna or Evelyn, would you like to jump in on this one as well?
Yes. I wanted to say, in my opinion, the key tenet here is first to lift up the voices of marginalized creators, allow them their space to tell their own stories. And then second, yes, everybody else can also write diverse characters, even if it's not a lived experience, as long as a lot of research has been done, as long as you lead with empathy, and you are communicating with sensitivity readers who can help you pinpoint if you're making mistakes you're not really realizing. I think it is, to a certain degree, responsibility for everybody to include diversity, so that it doesn't become a talking point. It should just be normal. We all come from so many different places. We have so many different ways of thinking. So I'm still sort of struggling personally with the concept that we have to work so hard to add diversity when we are all diverse.
Exactly. That's an amazing point. Evelyn, would you like to jump in as well?
Again, Marianna said everything perfectly. I guess like just another thing that was in my mind was just this sense of, like, I know I have a lot of fear and trepidation when it comes to the whole like stay in your lane thing. Because I've seen that just destroy people's careers, and they're chased off of Twitter, and it's really scary because the way that it's being utilized, I think would scare a lot of people from trying to write more diversely. And then of course that snowballs into an issue of like, are we just segregating ourselves now? Can we only write people that we belong to or that we know of? But yeah, what Marianna said was perfect. Lead with empathy, do your research, and hopefully there is an abundance of forgiveness in the readers if you make a mistake. And yeah, going from there.
Yeah, definitely.
And if I may add something, you can make mistakes. We all do, certainly. The key is to learn from them, to accept the feedback, to recognize that you have made the mistake, fix it, and not do it again.
I definitely agree. Yeah. And just using that as a learning experience as well. What are some of the steps that maybe a non-lived experienced writer could take to make sure that they avoid some of those pitfalls in maybe damaging some of these marginalized communities that they're writing about?
If I can jump in quickly, I would say the very first step would be to read the books from people who belong to those communities, so that you learn, some of their experiences. Of course, not a single book is going to be the universal experience from that community, but it will definitely help you to start leading with that empathy I talk about a lot, so that then you have a starting point to do your research and follow through, write your book, get sensitivity readers, ask friends for opinions, and really introspectively consider if it's your story to tell.
That's a good question. Is this your story to tell? There's that question of, am I even, do I have the authority to tell this story? You want to think about that as well. So I think that was a great point. And then alternatively, on the other spectrum, what do you think some of the marginalized authors are facing within the publishing industry when it comes to getting their stories presented?
Is it for me? Well, in my opinion, the main issue they're facing is that there's a big push right now from everybody to support diverse books and diverse voices, as long as it meets certain people's criteria of what that diverse topic should be. So one phenomenon I've seen a lot is POC or BIPOC authors being boxed into the issue book box. As if our stories are only important if they're talking about our struggles. I want to see BIPOC characters falling in love, making mistakes, being silly, saving the world. And I don't want to just see issue books.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, 100%. I think that's a huge one, because it goes back to, you know, those caricatures that we grew up with, that we're so used to. And it's just such a fine line between like being a publisher, for example, who's like, check out all our diverse titles, but is it earnest, or are you making sure, like, for example, there's a certain Indianness to it to check off a box? Because I think the publishing industry was slow to sort of get on this train. I think streaming series and television is much more ahead, for example, than the publishing industry. And I know it's tempting to put out a few POC titles and say, hey, look, and then pat yourself on the back and think that the work is done. And no, the work is not done. You have to really want to do it, and you have to really want to do the work. And another thing I find sometimes is, you know, like on Twitter or wherever, people just start asking you these questions, you know, that they could Google, or if they really wanted to do the research, you know, and it's not on us to do that emotional labor as well. So I just think it's really important for the people who are in those positions of power to actually really want to make a change, and just to understand that it's not a change that in 6 months it's done. Like, you know, putting out your spring summer list, it's done, we did it. It's going to be an ongoing thing.
Right. Just before I pass this question to everyone else, I'm very curious to know, in terms of like screenwriting versus the publishing world, in your opinion, what is the publishing world missing that the screenwriting world is like really pushing forward when it comes to diverse stories?
I think in particular, what I've seen recently has been with streaming services. So Issa Rae, as an example, has become this power player, and HBO has kind of left her to do that work and create in a space where she wants to create the stories, you know, that are important. Like, she's there's certain mandates she has about never having stories that are not led by POC. And then I think we all remember Michaela Cole and I May Destroy You, which was incredible. And so that was pitched to Netflix, and they wanted to take over, but they were going to give her a lot of money. And she was like, thank you, no thank you. And then HBO came along and they gave her full creative control. So just like examples like that show that, you know, that there have been advancements. It's not, of course, Hollywood wide, but things like that I have yet to see in publishing. Love to see it someday.
Yeah, definitely agree with you. Sondi, do you have anything to add as well?
Yeah, actually, one of the things that I think is really interesting about the kind of the space between, you know, the publishing industry and the streaming entertainment industry is that I feel like the streaming networks are much more willing to take these big risks because they are assessing things from the perspective of the multiple different audiences. I think when it comes to publishing, we have this idea of who reads, and then we stop with a very specific type of audience, and so we want to cater to that very specific audience. And that's one of the reasons I feel like, you know, Wattpad is well positioned, because using the data that we have, we're able to identify how broad our audiences are. And so as writers, it gives us the space in which to create with an understanding that, yes, we have people who want to read these types of books, which is something that we already, you know, we all knew as people of color as well, because we know what I know what I like to read, and I don't fit a particular demographic that people would say, oh yeah, she's an avid reader, you know. So one of the things that I'd like to see happening in publishing that, you know, could match what we're seeing in streaming is to kind of take more risks and to understand that there really is an audience out there for this content.
I think even the genres are pigeonholing us a bit. There was a discussion about this on Twitter last week, but it was this idea of like, you know, something like Squid Game, right? Like, I never knew I was the demographic for this super depressing show with all these deaths, but I was addicted to it, right? But I also love rom-coms. And I think in books, sometimes the way it's marketed is like this assumption that only a woman of a certain age will read a rom-com. But it's like, I read rom-coms and I read crime thrillers obsessively. And those things, two things couldn't be different, but will both of those things be marketed to me? Probably not. So I think that's something to think about too. Like, you know, maybe we're being too rigid. Maybe we're actually limiting ourselves with these strict genre and marketing strategies.
Yeah, definitely agree. Evelyn, Marianna, do you also have any opinions on this as well? Definitely. So one thing I wanted to talk about, you mentioned, I guess what I want to know is, have you had any obstacles as women of color in the writing space? And if so, what are some of those obstacles?
I want to jump right in here because, you know, not many people know I was actually writing for about 15 years before I switched over to writing on Wattpad for leisure. And I worked primarily as a ghostwriter and as a freelancer. For a very brief duration of time, I did indie publishing. And the thing that I found most interesting is that I got and this is just publishing, I got very different reactions to the exact same types of books based on whether it was under my pen name with the, you know, the image of your classic white writer versus my actual self. And for a good year or so, when I got onto Wattpad, I kind of, you know, so quote unquote, learned my lesson. So I came to Wattpad and I didn't use my own face. I put together a little logo with the LK1 as my original username, which was Lesser Known One. And I didn't bring any emphasis to who I was as a writer. I put the emphasis on, you know, the book I was telling. And even though the book was definitely incredibly diverse, it was still very ambiguous as to who I might be. Because publishing really, you know, when I came into it 15 years ago in particular, I was taught that you have to be a certain type of person to succeed here, you know, and that was a rough lesson. It was fantastic to unlearn it. It was really fun to find my space and to find my readership and to see that, you know, I can put my face out there. I can say, hi, my name is Sondi. I am the person that I am, and still have a readership. Because for many, many years, and this is where I think that the gatekeepers really, in some ways, are harmful. It's not necessarily that I'm stopping you from coming through this gate. I'm stopping you from coming to this gate. Mm-hmm. I'm stopping you from coming to this gate. And so I think that the thing that is fantastic right now in publishing from my perspective is I'm seeing many, many more people come forward and say, listen, this is just who I am. This is just the type of writing I write. If it's for you, it's for you. If it's not for you, it's not for you. But I'm not going to, you know, repackage myself as someone other than who I am so that my content or my books can be more palatable to you, you know?
Mm-hmm. Definitely more authentic marketing, finding that readership, like finding your audience. That's really important, I think, for all authors, but specifically marginalized authors to hear. What was that process for you in terms of like finding that audience?
It was really easy with Wattpad. And I hate to keep going back and just, you know, hammering that home, but it really was. I posted my content. People liked my content. I you know, started talking about it on social media. People liked what I was talking about. I didn't have to do anything really special. And I think, of course, this is very anecdotal because everyone else's experiences are their own unique experiences. But, you know, just developing a tiny readership. When I put Lead Me Astray up, I was doing read for reads and hanging out in the forums and saying, hey, would you read my book? And all of the fun things that we as Wattpad writers can sometimes do. And all of that was not from a space of I want this to be a major book that gets published and It was just from a space of, hey, you guys are writing too, I'm writing too. Let's read each other's books. And I think that that really is what bridged that gap. It kind of took me from a space of even thinking about it in terms of, you know, a standard, the so-called the standard that I have to live up to. And it brought it back into a play space. It brought it back into a space of creativity for the sake of creating, you know. So again, this isn't everyone's experience. Some people will come to it in a different way. Some people will come to it sooner. Some people will come to it later. But for me, just shifting my perspective from thinking about writing as something that I have to hit this check mark and my books as something that I have to kind of live up to the standard for, and kind of reframing that as my books are just an extension of my creativity, allowed me to bond with like-minded writers. And that was a really important aspect in terms of allowing me to be my authentic self.
That's amazing and really refreshing to hear, like approaching your writing from a place of creativity and not so much of like, how can I fit into this mold? I think that's awesome. Evelyn, was that your experience as well when writing on Wattpad for the first time?
So before I came to Wattpad, I was definitely pursuing the traditional route, the traditional publishing route. And my experience with the literary agents were actually kind of different. It's one of the things that she actually brought up was that it's a plus that you're a person of color, because people are looking for people of color right now. I am looking, and that can be a huge bonus. You know, we can market that. And so that kind of took me off guard a little bit because, you know, like we're on the phone. I wanted to talk about my story and what I wrote. I didn't want to talk about how we can sell me. So it was very different for me. And then coming to Wattpad was kind of freeing. So it's almost like the opposite experience. I didn't have to think about myself anymore. I just came to Wattpad so that people could read my story, and it didn't matter who I was. It just mattered what was happening in the story.
That's awesome. And how was that feeling of like finding your audience on Wattpad?
How was it? It was surreal. It was very surreal. Like the Waddies and everything it was like a storm. Everything happened so fast. Because before the Waddies, I hadn't really engaged with Wattpad too much. So I didn't even really know the community. I didn't know how vast it was. But yeah, ever since then, you know, I've made like so many friends, made so many connections. Obviously, I'm here talking to such lovely people now. So yeah, it's been a magical ride.
That's amazing. Marianna, do you have anything to add to this as well?
Yes. So my writing journey started many moons ago. I won't say how many because that will age me. But it started on anime fan fiction. So this is from, you know, a Japanese animated show with Japanese characters. And the stories that people were writing with their own characters and the original cast showed mostly white people. Or very white passing. You know, the names, the locations. And I was still in Venezuela back then and actually teaching myself English through fan fiction. And I was like, well, if I want people to read my story, which is already going to have very, very weird English, then I should create a character that sounds white. It took me many years to unlearn that behavior and to realize that I could write my own people into my stories. And maybe the audience would be smaller, but it would be the right audience. So finally, fast forward a bunch of years later, when I joined Wattpad and started posting my stories. My first story, on Wattpad, the female lead is also a white girl, but the love interest is a Venezuelan guy. And that was my very subtle way to introduce Venezuelan culture through the lens of this white girl who's going to fall in love with a Venezuelan guy, because that's what I wanted my readers to experience. That's how I wanted them to start getting on board with the rest of my stories that were going to be progressively more Venezuelanized. So I did that. I'm very happy with how it's turned out. I am honestly every day so shocked by the audience that I have built, and in the fact that people from all over the world are reading my stories and they're relating to them, because at the end of the day, they're stories about people.
Right. That's amazing. What an interesting strategy that you use to write about those Venezuelan nuances through the gaze of a white character. I thought that was really interesting.
And very sneaky.
Very sneaky and very clever. Romi, I did not ask about your experience first writing on Wattpad. Would you like to share that with us as well?
Sorry, are you asking me? My internet is cutting out a little bit.
Yes, I'm asking you, like, what was it like writing on Wattpad for the first time?
It was great, actually. So I had self-published before. So I know you guys were talking about, you know, did you change yourself to break in early on? I did not. And as a result, I was rejected like over 100 times by literary agents, because it was at a time when vampire books were all the rage. Twilight. Everybody was writing the next Twilight, right? And here was I with this book about a South Asian character who has a year to fall in love because she doesn't want to be with the guy her parents have chose for her, right? And I was not going to give her a thirst for blood. Like, she was not going to be a vampire. I refused to do that. So yeah, I was rejected. And so then I learned about self-publishing. I self-published the first book. Soon after, there was a sequel. And then I thought, okay, how can I actually reach people? Because I don't have a platform. So Amazon lets you make a book free if it's exclusive. So I'm like, okay, let's try that. First book free, gateway drug into the sequel, make good royalties on the sequel. This is a good marketing strategy. And it was phenomenal. Just, I was reaching people that I would have never expected to reach, which is very similar to Wattpad in that way. You know, like there would be a mom of 2 in Texas reading my book, sending me a message on Facebook. And it just, that made me believe, like, that was the moment where I was like, you know, there are commonalities, like there are universal themes. People just want to find love. People want to feel seen. And people can enjoy stories from different cultures. And that's when I knew I had to keep going. And soon after, I was approached by Wattpad. They had seen my book reviewed on a book blog, and the platform was just starting out at the time. Also, I am aging myself by revealing that. Yeah, so then we talked and I posted the story there. And, you know, that's when I found the amazing community of Wattpad, and the readers are just so amazing. Their comments, like, they're so enthusiastic. They're also very, you know, honest, and they'll let you know how they feel, but it's like a good space. And it's just a great way to connect with people. And yeah, I've been on Wattpad ever since, and that was a long time ago. So.
That's amazing. And I think one of the things that I really enjoyed listening to was the fact that all of you folks have this access to your readers that maybe some traditionally published authors may not be able to have. So would you say that going this route and sharing your stories on Wattpad does give you this access to have a relationship with your readers?
And it definitely does. Yeah, I just wanted to jump in and say that because I actually had a reader to reach out to me recently, and it was actually in the context of, I think it was Evelyn, who said sometimes we can be really scared about the stories that we dive into because we don't want to have that feedback that says, oh, you missed the mark. Lead Me Astray features a non-binary character, and I had a reader to reach out to me directly in the comments and say, listen, I unlocked this book specifically to read this book, and I am disappointed. And it was hurtful. I'm like, what do you mean you're disappointed? And he says, well, listen, are they? I'm not sure of their gender because they didn't identify themselves, but they say, well, I chose this book because it features non-binary and trans characters. And here we are talking about this non-binary character, genitalia. Now, without giving too much away with that story, and also in context with our audience, there were things within the book that required the particular thing that I was talking about there. But with this particular character, it was necessary. And yet the conversation with my reader and having that very human experience of someone saying, this is how this scene impacted me personally. This is how this scene has missed the mark for me personally, allowed me to step back and look at that scene from a fresh pair of eyes. And although it was the right choice for that particular book, it does let me know that as I move forward with other types of books, I have to think about this from the lens of my readers as well. And that's the empathy that Marianna was talking about, but we also have to remember that sometimes empathy requires you to be able to step into the shoes of the other person, and there are just going to be some spaces in which we can't do that. So having that access to our readers allows us to, when we can't see the wall in the way of our experience and theirs, the reader can speak for themselves. They can say directly, this is working, this is not working. And in that way, we can craft much more authentic stories, taking care to meet the needs of our readers while also still sharing the perspectives that we intend to share.
Yeah, and that gives inclusive storytelling a whole new meaning. It's not just about writing or adding certain characters or having the nuances, but the fact that you're able to actually hear from your writers and say, hey, you know, I'm not really feeling this scene, or hey, I really love this scene. It made me feel this way. I think that is just amazing. Does anyone have anything to add to that?
Yep, I was just going to add that having that immediate access to your readers will definitely help you develop a thick skin, which is actually a very good skill to have in the book world at large, whether it's on Wattpad or other digital platforms, on self-publishing, indie publishing, and traditional publishing. Regardless of your level of exposure to readers, you will face rejection at every single step of the way. And it's just absolutely beautiful, in my opinion, to have that access on Wattpad and the ability to build community. And readers, yes, they will let you know for sure if they're disappointed or if something has made them upset, but it will also make you both a better writer and a better person.
Definitely. So we have a few minutes left. Evelyn, did you want to add something?
I just wanted to say that it's like having telepathy, really. It's something that I think traditional authors will never really be able to experience. You get to follow readers in real time as they read through your work, and they post their thoughts in real time. And, you know, you just spend the entire day just kind of reading through their comments, kind of going like, oh, 2 hours ago they were on chapter 2 and now they're on chapter 4. And, you know, so it's a lot of fun.
That's awesome. So we have some questions from the chat. Ronnie says, I'd like to know how you include diversity in your writing, especially when including a small cast of characters. Also, how do you subvert the tropes you include in your stories? Oh, sorry, this is from Joanne. I can repeat the question as well. How do you include diversity in your writing, especially when including a small cast of characters? And then how do you subvert the tropes?
Well, I actually write polyamorous romance, so it makes it really easy in some ways because I always start off with 3 to 4 main characters anyway. And so it gives me the space to where whether we're talking about different races and ethnicities, or multicultural characters, or people of different genders, or different sexualities, those 3 characters give me the space to play with that in many, many different ways. I try to subvert tropes by, first of all, every trope, whether I, you know, especially as a ghostwriter, whether I was writing something that was specific to the genre that I liked or writing something specific to what my client asked for. I think that as an author, subverting tropes is really the name of the game anyway. And I do that personally by making sure that I'm approaching the trope itself. So for example, 2 Friends, One Bed, still within or from the lens of the characters who are very different from who I am. So how I might do that trope in my own personal life won't really matter. And that's why I can do it differently for every single book, because my characters are going to respond so differently based on their background, based on their expectations of the other characters within the book.
Does anyone else have any special ways where they subvert tropes in their writing?
Yes, subverting tropes is all about having fun. So you know what the tropes are, you know how they typically go. How would you enjoy seeing that trope in your story? Or as Marie Kondo said, what sparks joy to you?
Yeah, I think it's definitely about joy. And I feel like from my perspective, there's just flat out some rom-com tropes that I don't like and I don't enjoy. I was talking about this on TikTok last week. And so in this book, 24 Hours in Paris, for example, you know, you could easily call it enemies to lovers. And I just don't get that. We're adults. I don't have time for actual enemies. Like, what is that? So I changed it and I was like, well, you know what? It's going to be that they haven't interacted a lot. Like they're two coworkers who basically missed their flight and they're stuck together for 24 hours in Paris. So I'm like, instead of having them hate each other, which just would not feel authentic to me, you know, because all the years I spent working in the corporate world, like that would not have been sustainable. Like HR would have been called. I can't hate my coworkers. So why don't I just make it that they are, you know, their personalities are pretty different and they haven't interacted a lot. So initially, maybe they find each other a little annoying and then it changes. And so that's how it had to be for me in order to feel like something I would enjoy. So I think, as Marianna was saying, like coming from the place of joy, and sometimes that flat out means just veering left and not doing the trope.
Right. And even when you were describing a little bit of your plot, that sounds way more interesting than like the enemies.
Thank you.
So I agree. We have another question from Clarissa. Which genre seems to be lacking in diversity right now? I'll leave it there.
All of them. 100% all of them.
I agree.
I would, and also like I've been reading a lot of crime thrillers. I have to say crime thrillers big time, because it's always like the detective partners. It's always like the gruff, troubled white male, and then the younger detective who a female, always white, and you know, but she's a feminist and that's great. But like, let's add something more to the mix in that dynamic. I would love to see some more diversity in crime thrillers.
Definitely. Anyone else want to jump in on that question? Okay, so we have a couple more minutes, not very much, but if anyone wants to jump in, feel free. What is some advice you have for new authors who are trying to get this right?
Keep going, keep going, keep going. I've heard from someone once before, writing is like, you know, deciding you want to do homework for the rest of your life. And it really is. You will be doing homework for the rest of your life. But here's the thing. Writing is the kind of homework that gives back to you. You actually get to visibly see yourself. You get to go back and read something you wrote, you know, a year ago and say, oh my God, did I write that? And then something you wrote 5 years ago and say, oh my God, did I write that? But you see the progress, you see yourself getting better, but that only happens if you keep doing it. If you decide, oh, I didn't hit my benchmarks for this year. I intended to sub to, you know, this amount of different publications and I didn't do it, or I didn't get accepted, or I got rejected in some way, and you stop there. You never get to look back and say, wow, look what I did 5 years ago versus now, because there won't be a now. So my primary advice to all writers is it doesn't matter whether you think you're succeeding. You're not looking for one big break. It actually happens in a series of a bunch of little tiny moments that you don't even notice, but you'll look up and have the career you want if you just keep going.
Definitely. That was great advice. Anyone else?
Yep. My advice is we have essentially in this panel written a dissertation on the topic. Watch it, rewatch it, and rewatch it again. All the great advice is here. And of course, if you have any other questions, comments, suggestions, or you just want to chat, you are always welcome to reach out to any of us on Wattpad, on social media. We're here for you.
I think that is a great way to wrap up this amazing conversation. I just want to thank each of you for really just being vulnerable and sharing your experiences. I think this will be very helpful for people who want to write diverse and inclusive stories. So thank you so much.
Thank you. This is so fun.
Thank you for having us.
Yes.
What is Writers Connect?
It's a community of writers helping other writers.
Community of most of us are Wattpad stars.
Writers.
And that's the connecting thread.
And that's the connecting thread.
Thanks for sponsoring us, Wattpad.
But we are writers. It's what we do.
We write every single day.
Well, some of us do.
So we've decided to hold our own author convention.
We have panels organized by writers with topics we want to talk about.
Genre panels like romance, new adult, and vampires.
Industry panels like serial fiction, the craft of writing,
how to get an agent and keep one.
And we have author meet and greet sessions all online.
We don't just talk about it, we live it.
We're not a panel of experts selling books about how to do things.
We're writers, just like you, and we have experiences to share.
So connect with us. Maybe you learn a thing or two.
We write together, we thrive together.
Writers Connect, November 5th through 6th.